Well, I was born in Aurora, Illinois, and I remember the time when my mother and my dad and myself were just going to move to the east side of Aurora, Illinois to a rented house. That was a big deal because I just had a baby sister born at that time. I went to new school on the east side and everything was going pretty well. My dad was a milkman and we were pretty close. One day he took me to the store in the evening to get some milk and other things. And he told me, I'm going to go away for a while. I'm going to go up to Alaska to help build bridges for the Army because I don't want to be drafted where I might have to get into battle and I might be killed. But this way I can serve the United States and not get killed. So you will understand I'll be away for a couple of years, but I'll write letters and we'll stay close. Well, I felt bad about that. A day or two later, I said a tearful goodbye to him as he was on the porch turning his mail milk brought over to another person. When I came home, he was not there anymore. He wrote a few letters. Then after several months, my mother said, we're going to move back over to the other side of town and move in with Grandma. So I was back to another school I had already been attending in the past. A few more months went by and my mother called me aside. She said, I don't think Dad is coming back. I said, of course he's coming back. A couple more months went by. I learned that my dad had divorced my mother by false means. I said, but he's coming back, I'm here. Well, to make a very long story short, he didn't come back. Another woman from the same town where we lived had divorced her husband and gone up. It's a story that's repeated again and again, and I'm not a singular person, but that did have some very devastating effects, as you can imagine. Both my sister and I needed counseling because we felt something was defective in us. During that time, there were several episodes when I had panic attacks. I didn't know why. I just began to cry for no reason at all. I had a good friend, a principal in my grade school, Mr. Warner. In the middle of class, I just put my head down, began to shake and cry. The teacher would come over and say, let's go see the boss. Mr. Warner would take me aside and said, I know what you got. You got the blues. And he'd talk to me and he'd make me laugh. He just had come back from the Army himself. And he took me aside and said, if you ever feel like having the blues, come and see me. He took me aside and gave me things to do, like run the projector, big Bell and Howell 16 millimeter projector for older movies. He said, look, you can draw neat pictures. Why don't you start a comic strip and put it outside my office door every week? I felt like I had value. I forgot that my dad had cast me aside as if I had no value, and all of a sudden I had value. Mr. Warner was a man God put in my life to make life worth living, to show me I had value. At our 8th grade graduation, when I went through the graduation line, he shook my hand and held it a little bit longer. He said, if you ever need to borrow a dad, call on me. I did. He was my substitute dad at Dad's Night at some sporting events. And I remember the last time in a high school sporting event, he drove me home and we talked for a long time in the car. He said, Fred, I believe you can become anything you want to be. I needed a man to tell me that, and he was that man. He shook my hand and he pressed a few dollar bills into my hand. I watched his taillights go off in the dark. But that was a man that I wanted to model my life after. Speaking of the high school days, why, those were the days when I met my true love. And I went from zero to hero when the previous varsity football team voted me captain of the following senior year football team. Oh, they liked me, and so they voted me captain. And the guys liked me. When the football season came around, we worked so hard, we were going to win another Big 8 championship. Well, about that time, a new girl moved to our high school from Chicago. Her name was Ella. She was different. She wasn't like the country-type girls that came to our high school. She had high heels. She carried a purse with a strap. She used lipstick. She was different. And when she found out I was captain, all of a sudden she was there by my side. Wherever I went, she was there. Oh, of course, I didn't fight that at all. I mean, after all, I was football captain. So we spent quite a bit of time together. We played our first game and lost it. We played our second game and lost it. About that time, the coach began to start another kid in my position. I was captain. He kept me on the bench. And the guy said, "Why doesn't the coach play you instead of the other guy's name was Bob? Because Bob just fumbles and he can't make yards." And I said, "I don't know." It turned out that Bob's dad was doing remodeling for the coach's house. He was a contractor. So I discovered later there was some politics involved. I spent most of the season on the bench while Bob played in my place. We lost all of our games except one. I went from hero to zero. There was a big dance at Christmas time where the girls asked the guys. All the guys had dates except me. Nobody asked me to take them to the dance. I mean, life had gone down as low as it could go. I was home on November afternoon. It was cloudy, and I was in such a gloom. I thought, maybe 20 years from now, I'll be able to forget how bad I feel. The phone rang. I picked it up. I heard this voice at the other end. It said, "Hello, I'm Phyllis Eivmeyer. You don't know who I am, but if you're not got other plans, would you mind escorting me to the Christmas dance?" I said, "Oh, when is it?" As if I had no idea. "I'll have to check and let you know. I'll call you back." I thought, that was the voice of an angel. But I ran to the yearbook and looked up her picture from the junior year. Oh, it said, how come I never saw this girl? I called her right back. We went together, and that started a 60-year friendship that until just shortly before that she passed away. But we had the most blessed marriage of any two people I could imagine. Phyllis and I had a glorious message to marriage. We just felt like we could be two. 1 + 1 could equal more than 2. So we went together, and we both went to college. My dear mother never went to college, but she raised my sister and me and had a little tiny Christmas savings and college fund. She worked her fingers to the bone, supported my sister, myself, and my grandmother. Actually, my mother paid the bills for living with my grandmother. And there were a number of guys that expressed an interest in my mother, but she wasn't about to get burned twice. But some of the guys were just nice gentlemen that were willing to help. Take her places that she needed to go. She would take us on the train into Chicago at Christmas time where we could go through the department stores. That was a fun trip. She, very self-sacrificing. I remember one Christmas, I was looking at the pile of stuff she gave all of us, and I had gotten her a little tiny thing of bluegrass cologne. And I got looking at it, I just began to cry. I was young, in 4th grade maybe. And she said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Well, you got us all this stuff, and I got you a little dumb perfume." She said, "But that made me more happy than anything else." So she explained to me that it gave her such happiness to give. She made me understand that that was part of her happiness. It was giving, getting. Well, I believed her. She was the real, well, my sister and I just hold her in high regard. I have to credit her for always looking for something that would develop an interest in us. One year she gave me a DeVoe oil painting set, so I took art lessons, and that was very developing. Another year she gave me a typewriter, a portable typewriter I could carry. I carried that thing until we even came to California. I was typing the themes and reports on that typewriter. Another thing she gave me was a photography set where you could develop film. At school, my first year in college, I was able to set up something like, I'm sitting under lights here, but I was able to set up in the girls' dormitory to have the girls come, and I took their picture, and I could develop those pictures on campus and then charge them $1 for an 8x10 portrait that they could give their boyfriends. And that's how I made some extra money. I could drive my 40 Chevy 60 miles to where my sweetheart was going to college. But we decided that a weekend romance was not going to work very long. We decided the best way was to get married, and she would go to work and pay the bills while I went to school, and then someday she could retire and I would pay the bills. Well, that was our dream, but we had to go through several stages to do that. The little college I was going to in southern Illinois was Blackburn. It was a cooperative school where you work half-time for the school and go to school half-time. And she was in Illinois College. After 1 year, I discovered I wanted to be an engineer, but they didn't offer an engineering degree. So I had to change to a university where they offered an engineering degree. Wisconsin was not too far away. I went to 1 semester to the University of Wisconsin. Well, that was okay, but I had another passion. I wanted to be able to write books. So I spent all my time trying to learn to write books and didn't get very good grades at Wisconsin, plus traveling back and forth on the weekends to see Phyllis. Well, she decided she would next semester go to secretarial school in Chicago, preparing herself so she could get a job when we got married and then support us while I went to school. So that was another step in the way. I spent another semester at the Illinois Institute of Technology while she went to Mosier Secretarial School in Chicago. I had a part-time job at the Fair Store. That was a big department store, selling shoes. Well, that was an interesting experience. Dog eat dog. You work on 8% commission. If you don't make your commission, you owe the store, but they'll never collect it. Most people owed $700-800, but they never collected. It was an awful disgusting job. Dog eat dog. You go to approach a customer, and one of the regular guys or gals would rush over right in between you and the customer. Can I help you? That was not what I wanted to be when I grew up. But anyway, after we got married that following summer, we went to the University of Colorado, where Phyllis got a job in the records office, and I enrolled in the engineering school. That was going along very well until we ran out of money, and the tuition was coming up. That was pretty high tuition. I had lined up a part-time job in Denver where I would go to do that, take a semester off from school, and write my novel. I was going to write a best-selling novel. And then we were going to make all kinds of money with that novel. I was ready to go to work right after Christmas to this micro-switch job in Denver. We lived in this apartment house with a landlady sharing the downstairs rooms, and she came, knocked on our door and says, "I got a phone call for Fred." It was the boss of Microswitch, and said, "We just looked at your paperwork, and it says you haven't been in the armed services, and we're afraid if we hire you and train you, they're going to draft you. So it's not a good risk on our part to do that. In other words, we're not going to hire you." And I said, "No, I understand." I said to Phyllis, "I think the Lord has double-crossed us because the job fell through. I'm going to have to go back to school, register late. I don't know how I'm going to pay for it, but maybe they'll let us extend." Well, she found out because she worked for the records office that we could pay in-state tuition. That was so much less and within our reach. Tell me God doesn't have a sense of humor and a wonderful way of working things out. So I began to really enjoy engineering and graduated from the University of Colorado, interviewed for a job with General Electric, Nuclear Energy Division, that brought us to California. We came to California, and this was a marvelous open door. We met some of the most beautiful people in this state. One of the engineers that was just within an arm's length practically of where I was working on my first assignment invited us to his church. Well, his church taught the Bible. We had been in Bible teaching churches, but they didn't emphasize so much the Bible. They did a lot of warm fuzzies to help people feel good. We had gone to her church regularly, and we continued to go to a liberal church, but this church in California was a Bible teaching church, and that just affected our lives totally from the inside out. Both of us had trusted in Jesus when we were young, but it had pretty much been dormant in our lives. Things began to really grip us on how much God must have loved us to keep us so close and bring us to this point. We began to grow. We began to make friends that were the kind of friends that could nurture you and come alongside. When we had our first baby, our youngest son, who is now just celebrated his 65th birthday, man, that makes you feel old. There were people in the church that just surrounded Phyllis and loved her and took care. And when we were going crazy because we couldn't sleep through the night, one family took our baby boy for several days and kept him while we slept straight through about 2 days. God bless them. They don't know. They kept us from going crazy. And then they got him on a schedule. People like that just come to your aid. Well, we've had some very wonderful episodes and experiences as we've grown together with people that have shown the love of Christ. So anyway, here we were, and here we are. We have learned that marriage is God showing his love through each spouse to the other. In other words, he was loving her through me and loving me through her, and that kind of combination is something that you just cannot replace with anything else. So many people seem to get married because they want to see a change in the other person. I remember before we ever got married, I remember that the love that God was developing between both of us was delicate. And I took on the back of her picture, a graduation picture I had in my wallet, I wrote something. I didn't know really how to pray this, but I wrote down, Phyllis and I are not guarding our love alone. God is guarding it with us. And I believe he saw that as a prayer of my heart, because he did. He kept us close right up until the very end. Anyway, we knew that as we grew and our children grew and went out on their own way, one day one of us would probably be walking alone. We were so proud that God gave us the love that he did for our 4 sons. Our youngest son became a police officer in Los Gatos, and he retired recently as a police sergeant, but he continues on the reserve. I got a second son who is a physicist at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory. They're making headway into fusion, the next energy source. My third son spent 27 years at Dolby, and now he has his own business over in Soulsbyville, where he was working on a project that take spoken words from someone who may have English as a second language and is very difficult to understand. He is with a company based in Stanford University that smooths out the inflections so that it sounds like perfect English if you have any English or other language. So they hired him to do that in his retirement. And then my youngest son is a homicide detective down in San Jacinto, Riverside County Sheriff. So they're all very happy with what they're doing. I have a number of grandchildren. They're out seeking their fortune. My oldest granddaughter works for the coroner's office in Los Angeles. She enjoys piecing bodies together, autopsies. One of the granddaughters enjoys acting, she's getting ready to go for an assignment in college to Japan for about a half a year. One of my other grandsons just graduated from the police academy, and one other grandson has graduated as a counselor, family and child counselor with an organization in San Jose. They're all moving ahead, and we're glad to see that as grandparents. Every single one of them, I have to say I'm proud of the way they are conducting their lives at this point. they keep in touch enough to let me know that they are seeking to follow the path the Lord is putting in front of them. They have enough love left over for this old guy. They let me know once in a while that they love me. They write that in an email or send a note. It's a blessing. They don't have to do that, but they do on occasion just reassure me that they are following his path. One granddaughter said it kind of like the others. She said that, bless her heart, she said, because of you, Grandpa, I never did stray too far from the Lord. Well, that meant a lot. So what I would like to just say to them is I hope I always will have a spot in your memory of someone who loved you unconditionally and always was praying for you, that you would be close to the Lord and look for his will in everything you do, because he's the one that can give you the knowledge, understanding, and wisdom for anything that life has for you. I have to say, I just can't thank the Lord for how surrounding the people have been here when Phyllis and I moved in this place. When she got sick with breast cancer, and God gave us 4 years after that, there was a friend here, Bob Buchanan, and I mentioned that he was the one that when he retired, he learned to do video composing and so on. We were good friends here. He was such a good friend. Now, when Phyllis was diagnosed with breast cancer, after having perfect checkups, and then all of a sudden, stage 4, she went for a double mastectomy, and I went with her to the hospital, and it was kind of tough, just seeing her on the gurney and then giving her a kiss while she went off to surgery, and I kind of turned and I was walking out of the room where I just left her and heading toward the surgery waiting room, and one of the nurses said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." Then I went a little bit further, another nurse came in and says, "There's somebody waiting for you in the waiting room." And I went in, and it was Bob. And he was standing there, and when I saw him, I just went over. He put his arms around me. I remember just putting my head up against his shoulder and sobbing, because he had been there, done that, And that was just the demonstration of another guy being there for you, and then it was okay. Just somebody understanding what you feel. You remember a little bit of what you hear, you remember a little bit more what you see, but you don't forget what you feel there. So he's been a good friend. Now he passed away a couple of months ago. So I miss him a lot, but we'll see him again. Yeah. You need friends like that. You need friends that will just be there for you. Why we talked about how I should take care of things, and one of the things she had on her mind mostly was taking care of her flowers. She had a lot of flowers. He told me how to water them, which I tried to do, but doggone it, they just kept dying. I water them and they watch them die. But there was one set of flowers that didn't matter if I watered them or not. They just bright and survived wonderfully. I said, I've got to get some more flowers like that. So one day I went out and I picked them out of the flower pot and tried to see what brand they were. And I saw what it said. It said, made in Japan. And that's why they never died. One of the kind of assignments I had at General Electric was to rotate among different groups. And one of the assignments was with the engineer who was one of the smartest in the whole organizations. I knew that because people would come to his cubicle, which was a big size cubicle, and I was the only other person in the cubicle with him. They would ask questions from A to Z, and he would always be able to help them. I knew he was smart. So I was to work with him and help him on his project. So he would sit at the table. We had a table in between us. He would write out the problem for me to work on. I would say, I think I can handle it. I was glad to have a problem that I could work on. I'd turn and go back to my desk and I'd work out what I thought was a good answer to his problem, technical problem. Most of them involve some mathematics and some solutions and some working that out. And I'd say, Al, I think I got something here. Can you talk? Oh, yeah. So I laid out maybe one or two sheets of paper with my solution on it, and he'd look at it, and he'd stare at it a little bit, then his lower lip would go out, and his eyebrows would go down, and he'd take a kind of a red pencil that he had, and he'd start. When he got done marking around on it, it looked like it cut his throat. And he said, no, this is not a good idea. No. Well, I don't think so. I don't think that'll work. So, well, let's try something else. I thought that was a good solution. So by that time, he was sketching out another problem to work on. And, well, he's smart. Something probably wrong with what I did. Same thing happened again. Every time I got a solution, he cut it all to pieces. Then at last he did one, and same thing happened. And he said, well, Fred, at last I thought I found something you could do, but I see I was wrong. Oh, I was devastated. I just couldn't say a word. I just turned away back to my desk. That was really, I was ready to get up and exit. But I had recently been to Bible study, and we came across Romans 8:28. All things work together for good to those that love the Lord, to those who are called according to his purpose. And I said, God, how can this be according to your purpose? I feel terrible. And the Lord says, don't feel sorry for yourself. I mean, it was not an audible voice, but now the whole industry, nuclear industry, safety industry, was looking for a solution to a problem. You got a reactor vessel that's 25 feet tall, 10 feet in diameter, boiler, nuclear core, 1,000 pounds per square inch, half full of water, half full of steam. That's high pressure with pipes coming off. And one of those pipes ruptures, or a well just gives way, and you got an open pipe, and the steam and the water begins to blow out. I mean, it blows out. And the problem was how fast, what is the mass flow rate blowing out? What is the thrust force? Is it going to send this thing to the moon or what? Is it going to blow the wall out of the containment? And they had experiments. They knew what to say, what to write down, but they didn't know how to predict it. And it was like the Lord was just feeding me information. Said, now, write the equations that you know how to write. Mass, momentum, and energy. So I wrote them. Says, now, apply those to a vessel and a pipe, which I did. I mean, I didn't hear spooky voices. It was just like, this was the logical thing to do. And now, how do you maximize a quantity? Well, you get the derivative and set it equal to zero. That's the maximum point. That's the top of the mountain. Set it equal to zero. He said, but there's two variables. Well, set them both equal to zero. It's like the top of a hill. Set both equal to zero, which I did. And then all of a sudden, my eyes about fell out. There was a solution. And I used that solution to predict how fast steam and water would come charging out of a break. I had collected some data, and I matched it with the data, and it exactly predicted the data. And I said, well, that's how it works. That's what's happening. And all of a sudden, well, thank you, Lord. And Al sitting over here, he says, what? I said, I wasn't talking to you. So I kept making calculations and showing that my theory really worked. And I took it all, and I walked past Al. We both worked for the same boss. And I showed it to the boss, and he says, it's amazing. You've cracked the problem. Hurry up, write the thing up, submit it as an American Society of Mechanical Engineers paper. I'll send you to a conference where you can present it, but that's great. He says, go ahead and do it. Al's stuff can wait. Yeah, that was news to my ears. So I wrote that as one of the chapters, and I thought, hey, well, that was really my claim to fame. And whenever I have opportunity to talk about it, and I've had many opportunities, I say, now, I don't want to give the wrong impression that I'm so smart that I got that idea. I want to tell you how it came. And you can call me a religious nut, but here's what happened. and then, well, audiences have come from out of the blue. The courses at General Electric that are offered every year, again and again, year after year, they invited me to be their after-dinner speaker, their graduation dinner. They wanted to know how come I had such success in some of the things. Well, I could tell them, it's not my smarts. Here's what you do, and here's how it happened, and you can do it too. If you realize that every talent and ability you have came from God, if you lay it on the altar for Him and ask Him to use it, He will. But first, you want to be sure you're rightly connected. Well, they didn't seem to mind my giving them that approach. God just gave opportunities. But then there were several hundred maybe, seminars where I could take a whole bunch of either book. Now, that was this book, but this other book was well, recently, maybe within the last 10 years, it seemed like it should come. It came mostly after my dear wife passed away. There were still a lot of stories that needed to be told, and a lot of people have read this that were total unbelievers and atheists, and they said, well, they appreciated reading it. I don't think it resulted in anybody's conversion that was an atheist, but they read it at least, and it's got the gospel. But it's more of the same. Here was a crossroad, a difficult situation that I saw no way to get around, and then God did something totally unusual. He cares, He hears, and loves. Yeah. Well, anyway, that's more or less where these came from. I'm working on one now I think will be a big help to a lot of young people. The title is going to be, What Should I Do Now? For example, like you get situations where you are just floored. I was the youngest member of the committee in a church at one time. And the others were grand old men. They were dear gentlemen. They were very kind to me, and we were sitting around a table talking about, well, a problem. And I didn't want to say anything because these were the wisdom of the whole church. And they were talking about a problem that seemed like, hey, it's got an obvious solution. Why don't they come to that? Well, I raised my hand, timid. I said, it seems like one way to solve that problem would be to do this. And then when I said that, one of the he was a CEO of the Santa Clara Water District. A very wealthy gentleman, very strong church supporter. He said, that's the most stupid idea I ever heard. And I didn't think I heard him right yet. Well, but I looked around the room and here's everybody sitting at the table. Deers in the headlight. And the chairman of the committee, he's sitting there. Fro, you could just cut the air with a knife. I mean, you're supposed, even in Toastmasters, you're welcome to give criticism, but in an uplifting, a way that builds a person up, doesn't cut them down. And nobody said a word. Well, what should I do now? Now, if that happened, I know what I do. I'd simply ask, oh, well, I'm a new kid on the block. And I thought I was going to make a contribution, but I must have missed it. So I would really appreciate it, and I'm sure some of these other gentlemen sitting here would appreciate it if you would tell me why that was the most stupid idea you ever heard. Tell me what was stupid about it, then I'll know better next time not to make such a stupid idea. I'm listening. Well, anyway, you think of things 20 years later, 30 years later, Anyway, people need to know that you don't have to feel like you're alone when you make a decision. Say, help me not to make a mistake. Yeah. One thing that I did remember, one of my bosses, when Phyllis died, he called and he says, Fred, I don't want you to make the same mistake I did. When his wife died, he said after all the paperwork was finished, he woke up one day and thought a minute. He says, I don't have anything to do. Nobody needs me now. I gave her full-time care and now all the paperwork is done. He says, I have no value. I am worthless. Nobody needs me. And then he thought to himself, he said, I don't think the Lord wants me to feel that way. And he began to think, he says, look, I'm an engineer. I know how to do plumbing. I know how to do electrical work. I know how to do construction. And I got friends that are adding to their homes and they can't afford people to come and do all those things. I can go help them. So he began to make a few phone calls, and he was welcomed with open arms. He went and he began helping people do those things, and he said now he's got more work than he can handle. People calling him, he's a handyman. He just can hardly wait to get up in the morning and go and help somebody. So the key is stay busy with things that will bless the lives of others, where you're extending yourself to make a difference in the lives of people. And that just is, he said, I want you to have something that you have to get up in the morning for. That was good advice. Anyway, that's more or less what went into these books. I'm attempting to write I call it a textbook, sort of, based on some of the work that I did in my career, making it a kind of a fun book, but because there's still a lot of things out there. My technical courses were most successful when I focused on the things that were most interesting, the most useful, and the most surprising. There's a lot of physical phenomena that are pretty surprising, that, when things go the opposite way that you think they're supposed to, and then you gotta design something that accommodates that. Or simple things like if somebody's gonna shoot at you and you dive in the water, how deep down should you go so that the bullets won't hurt when they reach you? So if you're 10 feet underwater and they're shooting at you with a 38, the bullets will slow down enough so that they just bounce off. If you're only 2 feet down, why, they'll go right through you. That sort of real practical stuff. But anyway, people need to know things like that. I don't know. Those kind of things just keep me interested, and I'm sure they are of interest to certain readers. Yeah. Or, well, how tall can you have a soda straw? Not over 30 feet. Well, things like that. Anyway, those things are interesting. A life well lived is, in my view, is a life that extends beyond itself, a life that is so interwoven with other people in such a way that, well, there's a verse in the Bible, Philippians, let each esteem other better than themselves. What that means is put others first. A person that puts him or herself first in things, it's kind of a lonely road. But when you stop and think, oh, how can I do something that will help a person get a few inches closer to their goal, or reach something that they've been working so hard for, even if all I can do is pray, why, there's fulfillment in helping someone else make progress or overcome some difficulty in their lives. I think it's a life well lived is lived for the benefit of someone else, because there's a double blessing. They're blessed and you are blessed. I think that's just the way we're wired. All just going and asking somebody if they got time for coffee, because people have some have some buried experiences that they so shy they won't bring them out unless you spend a little time with them. Dear Lord, I just want to take this moment to thank you for the opportunity to have these kids and grandkids that you blessed my life with. The responsibility of bringing them to you each day and realize that you love them so very, very much. They are facing struggles, they faced difficulties, and they've had joys, and you've proved yourself in many ways of caring for them and helping them overcome some of the difficult tests that they've been through. Thank you that you will never leave them or forsake them, and that they are growing. My prayer for them is that they would walk worthy of the Lord, as it says in Colossians, unto all pleasing, being fruitful in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God, that they would be strengthened with all might according to your glorious power unto all patience and long-suffering with joyfulness, and give thanks to you. Thank you that your loving hand is upon them for good. When they falter, may they realize that all they need to do is look up and take your hand. Thank you for the power of prayer in their lives and all that you're doing. And I pray that you'll be glorified in each life. In Jesus' wonderful name, amen.